Metroplex will benefit passengers by creating more direct routes, decrease congestion at airports and in the air, improve air traffic flows, enhancing safety and efficiency, and reduce complexity and communication for air traffic controllers and pilots, making the system safer. Before we can change procedures, the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, requires us to conduct an environmental assessment to determine the potential impacts of the proposed procedures. One purpose of NEPA is to ensure that proposals, alternatives, and environmental impacts of projects are fully disclosed to the public. That's why we're here today. On May 11th, the FAA posted the Draft Environmental Assessment, or EA, for the Metroplex, and we opened a 60-day public comment period that closes on July 10th. We hope that you will consider submitting comments about the document. On this website, you can click the Comments tab, and it will show you how to submit your comments. It provides email addresses and a physical address where you can send comments after the workshop. Be sure to get your comments in before the July 10th deadline. After the comment period closes, we will review and consider all substantive comments received during the comment period as we develop the environmental determination. We expect to issue the determination by September 30th, 2020. A note about the draft EA. The FAA identified inadvertent errors related to runway designations for Orlando, Tampa, and St. Pete Clearwater International Airports. We updated the document on May 13th, and it's posted at metroplexenvironmental.com. I'd like to cover 3 procedural items before we start. First, if you're having technical issues, you can text us anytime during the workshop at 949-478-0253 or click the Technical Support tab on this webpage. Second, the workshop will last 90 minutes. We are recording the workshop and it will be posted on this website tomorrow for you to review. You can share the link with friends and neighbors who are unable to participate today. And finally, we have experts available to answer questions about the draft EA and the proposed air traffic control procedures. FAA air traffic controllers, environmental specialists, and industry representatives will answer your questions after the presentation. As a reminder, the questions asked and answers provided here are not part of the official record for the draft EA. To comment for the official record, click on the Comments tab on this website. That will link you to the FAA's official comment page for this project. Now, Lisa Favors, an environmental specialist for the FAA's Air Traffic Organization, will brief us on the draft environmental assessment.
Thank you, Michael. I will explain the draft EA for the South Central Florida Metroplex. As mentioned earlier, we developed the document in accordance with NEPA, which requires us first to identify the purpose and need for the project. In this case, the purpose and need addresses the current inefficient arrival and departure procedures for airports in South Central Florida. Many of the existing procedures are based on outdated technology and are less precise and efficient than satellite procedures. We need to fix that. The draft EA identifies causes for inefficiency as lack of predictable routes or procedures to transition aircraft between airport runways and high altitude en route airspace. Complex interactions between converging routes and lack of flexibility for air traffic controllers as they transition flights between high altitude and low altitude airspace. By adopting new procedures, which the draft EA calls the proposed actions, We expect reduced workload due to fewer controller-pilot communications, more efficient operations due to decreased complexity, and fewer flight segments resulting in more predictable traffic flows. A detailed explanation of the purpose and need is included in Chapter 2 of the draft EA. The draft EA analyzes potential environmental impacts from the proposed action and the no action alternative. It is important to note that we analyzed many additional procedures, but they not carried forward for detailed study in the draft EA because they did not meet the purpose and need or applicable safety standards. Under no action, procedures in place from June 2017 to May 2018 would remain except for planned modifications that are independent of the Metroplex. Our analysis determined that only the proposed action would meet the purpose and need for the project. The no action alternative would not meet the purpose and need, but it was included in the draft EA as required by Council on Environmental Quality Regulations. The alternatives are described in Chapter 3 of the draft EA. Affected environment describes the human, physical, and natural environmental conditions that the proposed action could affect. The affected environment is described in detail in Chapter 4 of the draft EA. The draft EA considers the effects on 14 environmental resource categories and their subcategories identified in FAA guidance. We evaluated the alternatives under conditions forecasted for 2021, the first year the proposed action could be implemented, and under the 2026 forecasted conditions. The evaluation considers the direct, indirect, and cumulative effects of the proposed action and no action alternatives. The draft EA determined that neither the proposed action nor the no action alternatives are likely to cause significant environmental impacts to any of the environmental resource categories. For more information, you can review Chapter 5 in the draft EA. The rest of my discussion will focus on the noise analysis since you, the public, expressed most interest in that. However, feel free to ask questions about any category during the Q&A session later in the workshop. First, I will explain how we measure noise. The FAA measures aviation noise using the day-night average sound level, DNL, metric. DNL represents noise as it occurs over a 24-hour period, with nighttime noise weighted more heavily than daytime noise. DNL is the standard noise metric used for studies of aviation noise exposure in communities. To account for differences in how people respond to noise, we use the A-weighted scale, DBA. This scale closely approximates the volume of sound as perceived by the human ear. The FAA considers aircraft noise exposure of 65 DNL in residential areas and noise increases of DNL 1.5 dB or more for noise-sensitive areas exposed to noise at or above the DNL 65 dB noise exposure level to be significant. The noise analysis demonstrates that the proposed action would not result in significant noise increases. More information about how the FAA measures noise is in Appendix E of the draft EA, and a detailed noise analysis can be found in Appendix I. Before I end, the following video will show you how to look up noise information for your address. You may search more than 122,000 grid points of noise data in the study area, presented in decibels, abbreviated as DB. The grid points are U.S. Census population points located at 1/2 nautical mile intervals across the entire study area. The map opens to the study area. In the search bar, start typing your address and similar addresses will pop up. Click on the correct address and you will see a light blue map pin. The map shows the model grid points in blue. Click on each point to see a pop-up with noise analysis results. The map shows data including DNL calculated for the alternatives and the change in noise when the proposed action is compared to the no action alternative. Now our air traffic control expert will brief you on some of the more significant procedures the Metroplex proposes for your area.
Hello, my name is Rick, and I'm an air traffic controller who works at the FAA's Miami International Air Traffic Control Tower and Radar Approach Control. In this section of the website, we will walk you through the flight procedure poster boards for Miami International Airport, Miami Opa-locka Executive Airport, and Miami Executive Airport. Each of the following boards shows a sampling of existing flight tracks and the proposed new flight procedures for jet aircraft. Each board will show either arrival or departure aircraft with current date tracks color-coded via altitude. The flight tracks and proposed procedures are all overlaid on a map of the surrounding area. Each flight procedure board is oriented with north facing up. The name of the airport and the name of the flight procedures are in the box on the upper right corner. This box also shows the type of operation, either arrival or departure, and the direction of flight, which we call flow, either north, south, east, or west. Flow is related to the layout of the airport's runways. At Miami, there is east flow and west flow. There are 4 runways at Miami, 3 parallel runways oriented east to west, and the 4th runway that is oriented northwest to southeast. For example, east flow includes 4 runways that allow aircraft to land and depart east and southeast bound. On an east flow, runways 9 and 12 are the primary runways for arrivals. Runways 8 left and 8 right are the primary departure runways. When in west flow, the runways used are runway 26 left, 26 right, runway 27, and runway 30. These runways allow the aircraft to land and depart westbound over the land. Miami Opa-locka Airport and Miami Executive Airport also have runways in the same orientation. For each of the 3 airports, east flow is the more common flow of air traffic, with aircraft arriving over land and taking off east towards the ocean. A few acronyms are used on the boards. A standard instrument departure, or SID, is a departure. A standard terminal arrival, or STAR, is an arrival. Area navigation, or RNAV, is a term for modern satellite-based navigation technology used in the proposed procedures. The spelling of each arrival or departure procedure is limited to 5 letters. For example, the spelling of the BNGOS departure is pronounced bongos. The stars on the board are locations of waypoints, which are fixed navigational points in space that aircraft fly to. Just as the spelling of procedures, waypoints are spelled with 5 letters. For example, the CSALT waypoint would be pronounced CSAL. The proposed flight procedures are colored purple for departures and orange for arrivals. These colored flight paths show the intended flight paths in the future for most flights using the new procedures. Surrounding the flight paths are dispersed path areas in either pink for departures or yellow for arrivals. These areas show the possible locations where aircraft may fly in the future and account for the possibility of different routing to avoid hazardous weather, for operational need, or for safety. The existing flight tracks are shown on the legend by color, starting from the lowest altitude in pink, then blue, then teal, and then the highest altitudes are in green. Here are examples of departure flight tracks at Miami International Airport to the east. Notice the colors changing and the respective altitudes associated with the colors. The flight tracks shown are a sample of jet aircraft operations, which are from March to April 2018 for Miami International during the daytime, which does not include nighttime hours between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. The bullet points on the right side provide additional details about the procedures. Next, we'll take a look at a few arrival and departure boards for these airports. This procedure board is for Miami International Airport East Flow departures. There are 10 proposed departure procedures that would be used when the airport is on an east flow. The bongos, glades, colada, vacay, foals, guava, mojito, noche, arps, and twister. This is the most common direction of air traffic flow at Miami International. There are 5 departures to the west and north called glades, bongos, twister, vacay, and arps. For airplanes that depart to the south and southeast, there are 5 departures called mojito, noche, guava, colada, and foals. Aircraft from Miami using the twister and ARPS procedures would initially depart navigating along the procedure and then would be given a navigational heading to follow called a vector by the air traffic controller. These are shown in a lighter shade of purple. The noche departure procedure is used for nighttime operations between the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Air traffic controllers may direct aircraft away from the procedure to avoid hazardous weather for operational need or for safety. This flight procedure board for Miami International Airport is for east flow departures and shows a zoomed in view of the 9 departure procedures. This zoomed in view shows the vacay, bongos, glades, twister, and ARPS procedures initially turning to the north, the foals, colada, and noche procedures turning to the southeast, and guava and mojito turning to the south. This flight procedure board is for west flow departures at Miami International Airport. There are 10 proposed departure procedures: the bongos, glades, colada, vacay, foals, guava, mojito, noche, ARPS, and twister. This is a less common direction of air traffic flow at Miami International. There are 4 departures used for northbound destinations called the bongos, twister, vacay, and ARPS. For airplanes with destinations to the south, there are 2 departure procedures called the mojito and guava. Aircraft flying to the west that are routed over the Gulf of Mexico use the glades departure. The pink dotted line is for aircraft departing runway 30. This runway is used as a contingency departure runway when all other runways are unavailable. The ARPS procedure is also used by departures at Fort Lauderdale, which are shown in light purple lines. West flow departures from Miami join the ARPS departure procedure near Boca Raton, generally an altitude at or above 13,000 feet. The twister is also used by Fort Lauderdale. Aircraft from Miami merge onto the twister departure near the South Florida Wildlife Management Area, generally an altitude at or above 13,000 feet. This flight procedure board is for east flow arrivals at Miami International Airport. There are 5 proposed arrivals: the Coastal, Doral, Heron, Largo, and Vice. Aircraft coming from the west, north, and northwest typically land on runway 12. These arrivals would use the Doral, Coastal, and Heron procedures. Aircraft coming from the south, southeast, and east land on the south runway, which is runway 9, and would use the Largo, Vice, and Heron arrivals. Arriving aircraft are either given vectors to follow by air traffic control or use the procedure as published. For example, aircraft arriving from the north may land on runway 12 using the coastal arrival procedure. This flight procedure board for Miami International Airport is for west flow arrivals. There are 5 proposed arrival procedures: the Heron, Doral, Largo, Coastal, and Vice. As you can see, the proposed procedures mimic current day flight tracks airplanes fly today. Aircraft coming from the north and west typically land on the parallel runways 26 right or 26 left. These arrivals would use the Coastal, Doral, and Heron arrivals. Aircrafts coming from the west, south, and southeast would land on either runway 27 or runway 30 using the Vice, Largo, and Heron arrival procedures. This flight procedure board shows all proposed Miami International Airport east flow procedures, including the 10 departure procedures and the 5 arrival procedures. For east flow procedures, departures shown in purple are given a navigational heading to follow to join the departure procedures. Aircraft arriving to the Miami area on routes shown in orange will fly on the proposed procedure until the air traffic controller issues a heading to guide the pilot to land. The two procedures in light purple are also used by Fort Lauderdale. The Noche departure is used during nighttime hours between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. This flight procedure board shows all proposed Miami International Airport west flow procedures, including the 10 departure procedures and the 5 arrival procedures. The dotted pink line is for departures that use runway 30, which is rarely used.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael O'Hara. I'm the Regional Administrator for the FAA Southern Region. I want to welcome everybody to this workshop on the South Central Florida Metroplex. This is our Q&A session. I'm joined by several technical experts, including Luis and Rick, Air Traffic Controller from Miami, from the Air Traffic Control Tower there and Radar Approach Control, as well as Lisa Favors, FAA Environmental Specialist, several others from the FAA, and we have airport and airline industry representatives with us as well. Kingsley and Luis are available to help with any Spanish translations with the Q&A if that would be helpful. And I want to remind everyone that we're holding this workshop to answer questions you may have and to share information about the South Central Florida Metroplex project. We're unable to answer questions about other topics in this workshop. I want to encourage you to submit questions to us using the Q&A box in Zoom or the links in Facebook and YouTube, or you can text a question to us at 949-478-0253. That number again to text us a question is 949-478-0253. If you need technical assistance during the workshop, please click on the technical support tab on the website. And I'll turn it over to Luis for just a moment.
Pueden someter sus preguntas en español a través de la aplicación Zoom, vía redes sociales como Facebook, YouTube o vía texto al número 949-478-0253. Una vez más, 949-478-0253.
Thank you, Luis. All right. And thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to jump right into the questions, and we have the first one here already. Good morning. I hope I'm not too late to submit this question for the second time. I know you have to screen questions. I'm a senior citizen in the Opa-locka, Miami Gardens area. I've already noticed an increase in aircraft traffic in my area. Can someone please explain in layman terms the project's impact on our area, and where in the study we can find the changes for the Opa-locka, for Opa-locka Miami Gardens? Okay, I think we can help with that.
Sure,
Lisa?
Michael, I can certainly pull up the noise tool so that we can zoom in that area. We can start there, and then maybe we can get one of the air traffic control specialists to help us out with what is happening in that area. If you log into, when you logged into this website, you went to Florida Metroplex workshops.com. And once you get to that site, in order to see the noise results of the study that we have done in this area, you click on the noise tool button that's highlighted on your screen right there. And once you get there, it brings up this page, and there, if you scroll down, there is a map, a search button, a search bar in that map. And you're able to type in your particular address or an address in the area that you are most concerned about. And in this case, we'll just type an address in there, and we can, if you click on that address, it will take you directly to that area. There's a little light blue map pin, and around that map pin there are little blue circles, and those blue circles have the noise data that was collected for the area, and you're able to see what the procedures we are referring to under this project is called the proposed action. You can see what the proposed action noise levels look like in relation to if we don't implement this procedure, which is called the no action alternative. You can see what that looks like. And then you can, just below that, you can see the change in those two procedures. You can see what that net change is for your area. Now, in the environmental document, if you have the electronic copy of the environmental document, you can find that at metroplexenvironmental.com. And again, that's metroplexenvironmental.com. And once you're there, you want to click on South Central Florida Metroplex. And we will show you with that website. And this is how you can find that documentation. So metroplexenvironmental.com. And then you want to, under the Metroplex tab, you want to search South Central Florida Metroplex. And it will bring up this page, and you can specifically pull up the environmental document so that you can see the analysis that we created. So if someone from air traffic is available to talk about maybe the procedures in the Opelika, Miami Gardens area, that
Sure.
would be helpful as well.
Sure, Lisa. So the first thing that comes to mind for that area would be Opelika departures. We did create a new procedure for Opelika called the Opelika Hustle SID, which is a departure. However, the way the aircraft are going to depart off Opelika is going to be the same. They're going to be given a radar vector once they take off. Now, when it comes to, maybe we want to bring up aboard Miami East flow arrivals and departures. The Miami arrival, I believe we designed to actually, I think it's going to be south of that area. And the departures are going to be pretty much going north over Biscayne Bay. I think the board's coming up. Yeah, so the orange would be northeast arrivals. So those are coming in, and I believe they stay south of Opelika Airport before turning into a downwind for runway 12. And then the departures that turn north towards that area will stay over Biscayne Bay before turning to the northwest. Now, on a west operation, I believe the arrivals from the west will continue to look similar to how the traffic is ran today. They're going to be pretty much on an RNAV star, and then if we're going to vector them to one of the north runways, we're going to have to take them off the procedure and give them a heading to get them to the north runways.
All right, Rick and Lisa, thank
and
you.
I just want to add one thing. You can see these boards back on that same website that we were on, Florida Metroplexworkshops.com, and you're able to pull up a board, that board that he was just talking about, the East procedures. You can find that board there. If you go back to that website and you click on the tab that says poster boards, you can find the poster board for your area, the Miami East Flow, and you can also hear an explanation about what's happening on this board. If you scroll down to the bottom, there's an audio file associated with each one of those boards. That might be helpful as well. Thanks.
Lisa and Rick, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to our next question. Can you move sea salt and deals? We'll want to pull up to explain what those are. Can you move sea salt and deals out over the ocean to keep that air traffic over a minimal amount of land and at a higher altitude when they cut back over land? Rick, do you want to help with that?
Yeah, sure. Louis, you want to take this one, or I can take it?
I'll help with that. So Cecil and Deals, they were both placed over Biscayne Bay to keep traffic over water as much as possible. If we were to try to move these fixes further into the ocean, the traffic departing in this direction will have to be kept at a lower altitude because they're competing with arrival traffic coming from the northeast. That arrival corridor from the northeast is one of our busiest arrival corridors. It's going to be a very slim chance that we're going to be able to clamp those departures. And the situation this will create, they will go over populated areas twice, once eastbound and then when they come back to the northwest. So that's the reason why we concentrate on trying to go over the Biscayne Bay, where it's not a populated area, obviously.
Okay, Luis, thank you. And that board shows the proposed route there. It also shows the historic flight tracks that, Lisa, help me out with that. Those tracks came from, I think, 2017 and 2018. Is that right?
Yeah, you're correct, Michael.
Okay.
And Michael, I also wanted to point out during current noise abatement procedures, the aircraft are not supposed to be turned either within 5 miles or 4,000 feet. Deals was moved further east than 5 miles. I believe it's 6-point-something miles, which will be an improvement to the communities. There are just on the west side of the bay.
All right, Luis, thanks.
Michael, just a little correction on this. The boards show a month's worth of traffic. This is a month's worth of traffic from 2018 is than what was modeled for the environmental assessment.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. All right, any other perspectives on that question from our panel? All right. So we'll move on. Can you explain your decision process for routing the 7 Northeast SIDS and STARS to and from Miami and all the Opa-locka flights over one area of Miami-Dade densely populated with minority and low-income residents? This seems very problematic. Okay, we can help provide some feedback and clarity on that. Lisa, do you want to address part of that?
Sure, I can address part of that. I would like to first start out by saying that our environmental analysis, we considered environmental justice analysis as a part of this EA. We looked at the potential of the proposed project alternative and the potential for it to cause disproportionate and adverse effect on low-income communities and minority population areas. And, if in fact we were disproportionately impacting or causing an effect to those areas, if it was determined that, we would, do particular mitigation for those areas. But in fact, after our analysis, it showed that this proposed project, if implemented, would not have any adverse or disproportionate impact on low-income and minority communities. And if you would like to see our analysis and the results on all the information we collected, feel free to look at section 4 of the environmental document. And if I'm not mistaken, in particular, it's section 4.3.8 in that document, and you can see what our analysis showed. So anyone else can take it from there.
All right, thanks, Lisa.
Jim.
Sure.
Yeah, Jim here. I just like to make one comment. I'm the national program manager for Metroplex, and I can assure you that none of the projects, and this is the 11th one, have we ever made a decision that's based upon the socioeconomic status of anyone or any area. We take this very seriously. This is one of those challenges we discuss with the airports. What are your concerns? What are your areas? What are your hotspots? So
that's right.
It would be unethical for us to make a decision otherwise. I can tell you we have guidance from the White House and the executive branch, from the Secretary of Transportation. We have a range of directives telling us what we're going to do to make sure that we apply these environmental justice provisions adequately, and we conform to them and we believe in them.
Thanks, Jim. You're right.
Jim, Lisa, thank you. From an air traffic perspective, Rick or Luis, do you have any comments about kind of the connectivity? I mean, when it talks about 7 SIDS and stars, there's a lot of activity that's going on. I mean, you can take that all the way back to the runways at Miami, but essentially you're connecting Miami to many different destinations. So any thoughts on that in terms of the SIDS and stars?
So from an air traffic perspective, if you look at current flight track data, you will see that as we designed this new project, we try to stay as close as possible as we could as the way we run traffic today. We also were able to take some flow of the traffic that is going today in that direction east, directly east from the airports, and move it down to a southeasterly track. We even move a fix called Quebola that we move further south to bring it over, I believe it's a water plant instead of populated areas. So if you show the board with the east departures, that will be a good example of some traffic that we took away from that northeastbound heading.
All right, we should be able to pull that up. Luis, can you explain that one more time with the board up?
Yeah, so if you look at the tracks that go directly east, those tracks are now going to go in the direction where it's, I believe is Jamba, and then the next fix is Quebola. That keeps it south of, I believe is Biscayne Bay, and it brings it over a water plant that's in that area.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other feedback from any other feedback from the panel on this one? Okay. All right, let's go to this next question. It looks like this may have some multiple parts. Let me see if I can process this as we go. Please explain why DNL at locations such as the waypoint Capra used by the 8 right approaches where planes are at about 3,000 feet would decrease with the proposed action for both 2021 and 2026 estimates. All right, and then there are a couple other parts. Please interpret a negative estimated DNL, and I may hold the third part till we go through there. So Lisa, can you start with that one?
I'll try to sum it up. I'm not sure I can go into that depth of detail with the tool. I mean, with our noise metric, but I can say that the analysis conducted compares the current conditions to the proposed changes in procedure. And if you're seeing a negative DNL, that would result in a reduction of the current conditions to the proposed conditions, not anything else. It's only a comparison between what we are proposing and what the current conditions are. I guess that kind of takes care of the first 2 parts of that question.
So the first part of that has to do with a specific waypoint. I don't know if anybody can address. I believe that must be west of the airport because it's referring to the 8 right approaches. So that may be west of the airport. Any thoughts about what would change in that area on approach to 8 right?
I'm not sure about the noise part, Michael, but as far as air traffic, the airplanes will continue to go over Copra at 3,000 feet, just like they're doing today.
Okay. So it may just be that it's a minor, change, a minor negative, a minor positive. Okay.
Could be. And we're not saying that you're not hearing noise, or you won't hear noise. What we're saying is that there may be small increases and decreases across the study area in certain areas. But overall, you know, compared to the proposed action to the current conditions, our analysis showed that there's no significant noise increases in across the entire study area.
Okay. So the third part of that, and I just wanted to break it up so it was a little more manageable. Third part, someone who lives in an area with with DNL of 59, says dBA, would need to be exposed to 4 times their current, I guess that means noise, before DNL reaches 65. The question here is, can Miami handle a 4 times increase in operations? But I think there are a couple parts we need to address with that.
Yeah, you know, the question about the 4 times DNL, it's probably an incorrect assumption they're using there. I'm not certain, but you're welcome to visit the website and look at our significance definition, so you can understand it a little bit better, because it sounds like maybe there's a little maybe the commenter is not really understanding the definition of significant. Let me tell you where you can find that. You can find some more information about that in the draft environmental document, and I believe if you go to Appendix I in the draft EA, you can read up some more information about that area specifically.
Okay. So there is a question about Miami in there, but I think what you're saying, Lisa, and you can correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but I think what we're saying is a 65 DNL is not a 4 times increase from 59. But so I don't know about the question about, can Miami handle a 4 time increase in operations? But I don't think that's, I guess what I'll say relative to Metroplex is this project does not project, because of Metroplex, the operations increase. So it does not show that. There could be a change in operations, but it would, I'm comfortable saying, unless Miami wants to add their perspective, but we're not anticipating an increase related to Metroplex between the no action alternative. Certainly nothing along the lines of 4 times increase. So I'm not sure what that's about. Maybe we can get a follow-up on that if that would be helpful. But Lisa, thanks for helping to clarify. Jim, did you have something?
Chatted about this a little bit. I mean, certainly, that would call into question our methodology if we needed to see 4 times as much traffic in order to have an impact. Noise is a science. None of us is pretending to be a noise scientist, but my understanding is that you're really dealing with a logarithmic progression when you're looking at the increase in noise and the increase in the dB level, but I can't quote the math, I'm sorry.
All right, thanks, Jim. And then Lisa, you may have said this, so my apologies if I duplicate, but the question was about 59. So it would be reportable if there was a 5 dB increase between 45 and 60, I believe is what they'll find on the chart you referred to. And then even a 3 decibel increase between 60 and 65 would be reportable. No reportable impacts associated with the proposal.
That's correct, Michael.
Outline. Okay. So you wouldn't have to go all the way to 65 before it would be reportable. Okay.
That's correct.
All right, we have another question. Where do I file a noise complaint? Okay. I feel like I'm tagging you, Lisa, a lot.
That's okay. That's okay. I can help with that. We have, the FAA has a lot of information available about filing about noise, across the FAA and the industry and academia, and they've worked to reduce the impacts of noise, and there's a lot of information, and thank you for pulling this website up. If you go to the FAA.gov website, And specifically in the search bar, if you type in Southern region, this will pull up a website where you can learn more about aviation noise and search a whole bunch of information about what we're doing trying to help aviation noise. And also on this site, you can file a noise complaint if you would like. But if you click on that, there's more information about the noise inquiries in the area, and you can also leave a comment or a complaint if you need to.
All right, Lisa. And then of course the airports have a noise office as well. And the FAA and the airport work together on noise complaints often, because sometimes it's in maybe one area of expertise versus another. You might think of it being related to an FAA procedure versus related maybe due to a construction project at the airport. But both the FAA and the airport have resources that focus on noise, and that's another avenue as well. So you can come to the FAA or the airport. We both track those. And I may be missing. All right, so we'll kind of move on from there. But Lisa, thanks for addressing the FAA part of that. Okay, we have another question here. What's the difference? No, I actually missed one. My apologies. Does this mean more concentration of airplane traffic? So I'll start with that. There may be some answers that others on the panel want to contribute, but new procedures are more accurate and precise. You can think of them as a more defined path, and that can result in more concentration of flight paths or planes flying that defined path more accurately. It doesn't mean they're all flying exactly the same path, and it doesn't mean that there are more planes flying. It could mean that they're flying in a more concentrated area. So from a draft environmental assessment perspective, I know Lisa said this a few times, so I'll cover it this time. But again, our modeling of the proposed procedures and those changes with the forecast levels in both 2021, which is the first year procedures could be implemented, as well as 2026 shows no reportable or significant noise impacts. So people could notice a difference in where planes are flying. One way I think of it is, if you live in an area that you hear a lot of planes today, you're probably going to hear those same planes tomorrow. They could be a few blocks east or a few blocks west, but you're probably hearing that noise anyway. So when the modeling takes that into account, that's why you might not see a significant change in that noise data. Not sure if others on the panel want to add to that.
All right, Michael, I can chime in a little bit. I mean, you're absolutely right, and I know we've heard previously that yes, some of us have lived within 10 miles of a major airport and been subject to noise. Some of the people on this panel, they are community residents. They live this on a daily basis. That it's a tough thing to make those changes within 10 miles of the airport. We realize that, certainly in this day and age with a very aware public, that they notice changes. So they can look up and know that an airplane was off to the right one day, is a little closer to today, is off to the left another day. There is some dispersion. These procedures absolutely are more accurate and repeatable. They're more precise. They are not on a rail, just like you said. There is some variance in where they will be. And we recognize this. We hold out that our modeling says there is no significant impact or there is no reportable impact on those procedures. This gets high enough level of attention that Congress in the 2018 Appropriations Act directed the FAA to conduct analysis of the perception of the change in noise, even though it may change visually, but there may not be an increase in noise. That we need to take a look at the perceptions of the community. And I'm not an expert on that authorization either. I think it's in about section 189. There are a number of provisions about noise analysis in the authorization. So I would encourage the public to become informed about this.
Jim, thank you. And I know I mentioned some dates on the tracks before, and Jim corrected me, which is great. So on the boards, those were showing a month of data from, Jim, say it one more time. That was from 2018, right? 1 month.
Sir.
However, the noise analysis compares the proposal based on historic tracks. And Lisa, you have that part. So that was, I believe that was a year of data that spanned 2017 and parts of 17 and 18. Okay. All right. So let me go to the next question here. What's the difference between intersecting inbound and outbound aircraft over the ocean versus over the northern suburbs of Miami-Dade? It seems like it would be better to manage away from populated areas. Rick,
I can jump in on this one and speak on it from an air traffic standpoint. I think it's important to note that it's still fairly congested out in the middle or out in the ocean. There's still a lot of traffic off of Fort Lauderdale that's departing to the south, possibly going to South America or Central America, or going out to the Caribbean. So there is traffic out there in the ocean. By driving these departures and arrivals farther to the east, we're basically just putting all the traffic over the ocean, which would make it too complex. There would be too many aircraft competing for the same airspace. So that could potentially decrease safety. Now, when it comes to the departures, if we drive them out further into the ocean, they're going to have to stay at a lower altitude because the Miami arrivals coming from the northeast are trying to also descend. So we can't just move all the traffic out into the ocean. It would make it too complex and would decrease the safety.
all right, Rick, thank you. So I may offer a road analogy on this one just because sometimes that helps. But if you think about traveling out of Miami, maybe you're headed to Key West versus Fort Lauderdale versus Orlando versus Tampa. I mean, you're going to exit the city on different highways, and there's a little bit of that same infrastructure in the air based on your destination. So every plane doesn't, first of all, you're departing a couple different runways in Miami, but you're also headed to potentially hundreds of different destinations. And all of that traffic merges with the traffic from other airports going to similar or different destinations, much like you'd see on the interstate. So I don't know if that helps any, but you can't travel out where everybody leaves Miami on one road, and you can't do it that same way in the air. So hopefully everybody agrees with that. I'm not sure if anybody on the panel wants to add an additional perspective. Caesar, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll tag along a little bit about what Ricky said. For the flight crew, obviously, the number one thing for us is safety. But when it comes to the noise, we try to be good neighbors also, and we want to get the aircraft off the runway and start climbing. And the higher we get up in the air, of course, the quieter we're going to be. So we get into a balancing act here. If we were to, like he mentioned, there's a lot of traffic out there over the ocean. In order to keep us going straight east out over the ocean and then turn around to go west, we're going to be forced to stay down. We're the way that, again, it's a balancing act. And this way we can actually try to continue our climb and get up as high as we possibly can. And as we get out over the bay and then turn northwestbound, by the time we make that turn, we're considerably higher and hopefully a lot quieter down too.
Caesar, thank you. Okay, let's continue. Scott, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you. If I could jump in on that too, just to kind of follow on tag on Caesar's comments up there. I have a dog in the fight here. I live here in Miami. I was born and raised here. I lived in and kind of grew up in a lot of the areas that we're discussing now. As an airline operator and both as a pilot, we do a lot of things that we can, or we make a lot of attempts to mitigate noise, even prior to the beginning of the takeoff roll, meaning like we'll use assumed temperature, derated thrust settings to, and it's beneficial to the airline as well, but it certainly cuts back on noise pollution as you make your climb out to the east or west of Miami. And then at the same time, we're looking to get the airplane as clean as possible and to reduce the thrust as early as possible. So in part of these things that we use to reduce the takeoff settings on the airplane, to kind of reduce those. It carries over into the climb profiles as well. So once you level off at say an altitude, say 5,000 or 7,000 feet, and you're just crossing the western boundary of Biscayne Bay, if you're given another climb clearance, that reduced thrust carries over into the application of the next thrust for the next altitude. So if you're cleared to go from 7,000 to 15,000 feet, you're not using, I guess a good analogy is you're just not stepping full throttle on gas. You're taking your time. It's nice and quiet, and it's reduced climb, if that helps any. So.
Hi, Michael.
Scott, thanks. Looks like Virginia's going to chime in as well. Thanks, Virginia.
Yes, Scott, thank you for that. This is Virginia with American Airlines. As Scott mentioned, there are many things that airline operators do to mitigate noise, Michael. For example, our aircraft today is a young fleet. Our modern fleet is 50% quieter than it was 10 years ago. We have just in the past 7 years undergone a major investment in modernizing our fleet. So what does, including retiring some of our older aircraft, such as our MD-80s, and investing in over 500 aircraft since 2013, such as the 321, which are much quieter aircraft. So we are committed to continuing the process of mitigating noise and working with our airport partners and receiving their input and the FAA just to do that. As we do that, of course, we invest in new and quieter aircraft. We therefore reduce our noise footprint.
All right,
so Virginia, thanks. And I'll just throw in one more comment there, just on the backside of Virginia's there as well. But if you take a look at the evolution of aircraft and engine manufacture over the last 30 years or even shorter, as Virginia was saying, you'll see that there's a lot of, it's not just the airlines that are listening to the communities that are surrounding the airports. It's the original aircraft manufacturers, the people like Boeing or Airbus are listening to those people that are sensitive to the noise that's right around the airport. And just as an example, I mean, now you look at airplanes that all have high bypass ratio engines on them. And for those that are interested in engine performance and engine dynamics, it basically, the engine itself is a very small core, but now you have this big layer of air that just kind of blankets down the side of the engine. So when you look up and you see a big 747 with a huge engine on it, that most of it's just air that's surrounding the engine core, and that's mitigating a lot of noise. Or you may see things like you'll wonder as you see a new generation aircraft go by that you'll see a scalloping in the back of where the exhaust would come out of the back of the engine, and that's all noise mitigation. That's what it's built for, and that's the manufacturing listening to the communities that these airplanes are overflying, as well as just looking in the front end of an engine. Now you have this vast area of noise suppressing material that's now incorporated into these engines, and that's all because of comments from the people that we're getting on this forum today. The manufacturers are listening as well as the airline. So thank you,
Michael. Just one more comment, just as on fleet size. Obviously COVID-19 has changed our world. It's certainly changed, of course, the aviation industry dramatically. And as a result of COVID-19, we have also had to change and reconfigure our fleet, which also has an impact down the line on noise. Because, for example, we've had to retire our 757s and our 767s. So it's not only looking at older aircraft and how those come along, but the fact that we're operating in a very different world today because of COVID-19, we've also made adjustments that way.
Good to point that out. Thank you, Virginia. Scott, Caesar, everybody who chimed in. Great discussion. Okay, let me move us forward. Have any of you ever lived under a waypoint within 10 miles of a major airport? That would give you firsthand knowledge of what life's actually like when hundreds of low altitude aircraft are flying over day in and day out. So I think that's probably a local question. Rick, do you have anything to add to that?
I lived in Brickell, which when aircraft were departing to the southeast would hit that area. Now I live west Fort Lauderdale. It's not 10 miles. It's a little over 10 miles west, but airplanes are out there descending as well, all the way down to 2,000, 1,500 feet at times. So yes, I have lived in those locations.
And Michael, I as well, and again, growing up down here in South Florida and operating out of the Miami airport for as long as I have, yes, I am keenly aware and sensitive to I have, as I think we all are. I think that's the whole purpose of us being here. But we do, I think we touched on a lot of the mitigating things that we do or we attempt to do from manufacturing airplanes as well as from airline operators in the previous question. But to Ricardo, to his point, it works the other way coming down. When you're descending, what you're trying to do is you're trying to land with a flap setting that helps mitigation noise. Of course, the byproduct of that is it also saves fuel. So you're getting you have two focuses there, and with the with the performance-based navigation, you can really translate that into a constant path descent. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get a minimum flap setting and no throttle increase until you have to stabilize the airplane at 3 or 4 or 5 miles from the end of the runway, and you're bringing the throttles up smoothly and symmetrically to stabilize the approach for landing. So we attempt to do that almost everywhere in the world. It's not Miami. It's critical to all of our operations, and in a lot of cases, if we don't live by it, we get severely chastised for not taking the care to make sure that we don't cause the noise to the local residents. So,
good point, Scott. And
Michael, if I may add, I just want to point out that pretty much everybody that was involved in the design of this project, we live in South Florida. Some of us have kids that plays in parks where planes overfly all the time. For that reason, we were very conscious about trying to design most of these procedures over industrial areas, bodies of water, less populated areas. We really took into the consideration all the comments from all the previous workshops and the airport authorities. So we do feel the pain that this gentleman or lady expressed in that comment. We really took into account the airplane noise, and we tried the best that we could to stay away from the populated areas. But there's nothing that we can do for airplanes or locations that are in the path of the current tracks today, being on the final or right of the departure end of an airport. There's really nothing that we can do about that.
All right. I expect probably many more folks on the panel have experience either in where they live and where they work. And I certainly think you've heard the sensitivity. So we'll move on. I guess I'm not sure where we would go else with that question. I will pause for a moment, let people know that are watching. We're seeing a lot of people on Zoom, social media. Keep your questions coming to us. You can text us at 949-478-0253, or you can use the Zoom Q&A button to send us something. So let me keep going. Here's a question about aircraft noise. I think, well, I don't know, I'll read it here. It says, it's a small body of water and an echo chamber, and your plans to run hundreds of aircraft up that corridor is going to destroy the livability of tens of thousands of homes. I guess maybe that's talking about Biscayne. I'm not sure. Rick or Luis, anything to add? I think we've kind of touched on that, what we can do where it's possible.
Yeah, right. So I'm not an expert on what kind of noise an airplane makes over a bay, But I was saying before, you know, even if we move everything out to the east, it's already very congested and very complex. So we tried utilizing the bay as opposed to going over densely populated areas. That was our attempt, and also that's where the flights today, for the most part, fly northbound.
And I can try to help with that. You know, just like Ricardo said, the FAA tries to design the procedures to overfly areas that are less populated and less noise sensitive, and try to use, you know, water and industrial areas to try to lessen some of the noise impacts wherever possible. And we try to keep aircraft where over the areas that they're over today. And, you know, you can use our noise tool to show the model noise, and you'll see increases in specific areas. But I encourage you to review our chapter 5 of the draft EA. And in that section, it's the expected environmental consequences of the proposed action and the no action alternative. And, you know, I encourage everyone to review that. And you know, I say it again, we don't expect any significant increases in noise from the baseline conditions studied in the EA. So, you know, if we didn't adequately answer your question or your concern, feel free to, I encourage you to leave an official comment so that it can be addressed individually. Those will be addressed in the final environmental document, and that way we can really dive into what the question or the commenter is trying to get at. That's the best place to find some detailed information about the area. Thanks, Michael.
And Michael, could I weigh in and could I ask the crew to bring up the East Flow Departure Board again? Just you know, to comment on, because you know, we made some very intentional decisions, like Rick said, that you know, up Biscayne Bay and a number of places. You know, I like to point out that we made, I will say 6, I think it is, significant decisions to try and minimize the impact on the local community, or to make an improvement, if you will. So when we moved traffic down there, you know, Jamba, you know, over Virginia Key in that area, well, that was an intentional decision to mitigate impact in the local area. That mitigates impacts on Miami Beach, which you know, oh, by the way, on, you know, some of these suggestions understandably would benefit some communities. But if we drive everything straight out over Miami Beach, you know, they'll be hating on us because they're already impacted by the West Flow arrivals too, that come straight in over Miami Beach. So, you know, there definitely are trade-offs. Some of the things that we did, we worked very closely and collaboratively with the airport and with the airlines to do things like on the straight out departure. I don't think we covered this today, Rick or Luis, on the straight out departures to return the departure track to the traditional noise abatement track. That was a specific request that was noise related, to drive that track out to 5 miles. So that's where we come up with Sea Salt in its current location and Deals in its current location, partially because we had community input from North Beach, from, you know, communities around Biscayne Bay, that they wanted us to try and put that track up the middle of the bay. And if you look at the dispersion around the proposed path up Biscayne Bay, that will be mitigated to a degree. And I'm going to say that there will be less dispersion there. I made it a point today to use the noise tool, and I went up and down the peninsula from Miami Beach up north, and there were some significant decreases in the impact on that side. Granted, on other places, there are slight increases too. So it's not all a good news story for everybody all over. We incorporated the nighttime departure, the noche departure. On the west flow departures, we also changed the track to try and mitigate the noise impact to the, I'm going to say south. We moved the track to south of, I think it's 36th Street and 41st Street. So all around this area, as challenging as it was, this team made intentional decisions to try and minimize the impact and in fact to make an improvement. So I know we worked very close. Virginia, I don't know if you want to get in there and comment about the work that we did, or I know we've got Norman on, from the MIMDAD, environmental action.
Yes, no, Jim, you're absolutely correct. We're as a major airline here in Miami, we're very proud of the work that we did with the FAA and our airport partners. American Airlines has been part of the process, Jim, as you know, from the very beginning, and we feel that these intentional and changes that we've all agreed to were very much put forward with the community in mind as a result of those community needs. And we consider them very good results.
Okay.
If I
go ahead, Scott.
If I may just add just a little bit here too. It's kind of a pleasure to see these depicted routes like this. And I think that in your construction, for those that are designers in the construction of the National Airspace System, I think you use the same program that we use for required navigation performance when we're building an approach to, say, tight terrain or such that requires extreme accuracy in order to keep us out of terrain. And it looks like I think you're using a targets program, but you can see that the sea salt, and it actually depicts it on this departure that it's an anticipatory turn. So if you hook up this and back up just a little bit, what this targets does is you can take this cursor and you can put it over where you want this waypoint to be, and it sets it up as a lat long, and then they go ahead and name it, and then that we load into our aircraft databases through our manufacturer, and that's how these RNAV departures really are accomplished. So you can see that this is looking at sea salt, but it's a fly-by waypoint. It's designed as a fly-by waypoint. So the speed of the aircraft is computing its basic closure rate to this intersection, and it's starting to stay on a precise path prior to the west of sea salt, and then to turn as a fly-by waypoint to pick up the exact course on the outbound to the north of sea salt and going into Deals. And you can see that's why that star is a little off to the right, or Deals is a little off to the right of the path of the airplane, because the airplane's looking forward to its next outbound course. These combinations of these type departures, as well as the capability of the airplane, adds to accuracy within meters, not half miles anymore, miles, where you had a pilot that was having to anticipate a turn. So I just wanted to throw that in there for just a little bit of an understanding of how these things and how precisely accurate these can be when combined with a depicted navigation path and the navigational accuracy of the airplanes.
I want to add, Michael, if I may.
Norm, go ahead.
Yeah, the Noise Abatement Advisory Board for Miami, which has representatives from all communities. Obviously, we are a landlocked airport. They've been working a long time, many years, to obtain improvements.
We may have lost Norm there.
We may have lost Norm.
Okay.
If I can add one more thing, I just don't want it to get lost. The way we're operating today, if I'm departing Miami and I want to go to the Northeast and join the AR routes and for whatever destination that take me up to the Northeast, you can see those tracks. If you see all the blue lines that are going past sea salt, that's all traffic that's going out there over North Biscayne Bay, Miami Beach, Morningside, all that area. once this procedure gets implemented, if it ever does, that traffic will never be going over that. All those airplanes that are now going over that area will not be going in that direction. They will actually be going out to Jamba and out over the water plants and over Virginia Key, and then making the turns and out Falls. So basically, if I'm departing Miami and I want to go northeast, I have to go southeast before I go northeast. And the only reason for that is to decrease the noise over the North Miami Beach and in Miami Beach area. I want to make sure that that is not lost in the conversation.
Thanks, Cesar.
Michael, one last comment for me, and I can't speak for Norman and for the for the airport, but I can tell you he was talking about the Noise Abatement Advisory Board, and you and I and a few others are very familiar with that board. I have an analogy. When I was a kid in parochial school, the worst thing that could happen to me is to get called to the Mother Superior's office, because that was generally not a good thing. When that Noise Abatement Advisory Board, it's a no holds bar discussion with them. They lay out the community concerns on the table and tell us what their expectations are, what they want, what they've been working for. So this community is heavily represented by the Noise Abatement Advisory Board, by the airport. There is no coddling us when they were laying out their concerns. So, and I think that the project has delivered the best we can possibly deliver within the confines of what we were asked to do.
All right, thanks, Jim. I know we could stay on some of these. We have some more questions ahead of us, so let me take us to the next one. Maybe we can get, does this project include optimum descent profiles? Looking to see. Rick, do you want to take that real quick?
Sure, I can. Yes, for Miami Airport, all of our arrivals were designed with OPDs, so altitudes will be associated on some of those waypoints. This should be good because it should reduce communication between the pilot and air traffic controller. This will result in less read back, hear back errors. So yeah, we have the OPDs into Miami, and for some of them are descending down to 6, some of them descend all the way down to 4. It all depends whether you're coming from which location you're coming from. Louis, you want to add anything?
Okay, all right, thanks. Norm, welcome back. We talked a little bit about the Noise Abatement Board when you dropped, so I think we're good. If you want to add anything else, you're welcome to.
No, I would just thank you, Michael. Sorry I got disconnected. I was just going to mention that all the noise abatement procedures that we have in place today for Miami International Airport, which includes, to mention few, the closure of 2 runways at night, starting at 10 p.m. or under 5 knots, the airport will operate on a westerly direction. All those will still be in place. And we work together to make sure that all those procedures will stay in place.
All right, Norm, thank you. Okay, we have another question. Why does the panel keep saying proposed paths when flight paths changed months ago? You should know this. Everyone living in the new already changed flight path already experiences this. All right, so the panel may jump in on this. I can assure you that this project has not been implemented. These changes that are proposed have not taken place, and we've worked on some other noise complaints in the past to talk about historic flight tracks and where tracks have been. I don't know if anybody on the panel, air traffic, we have not made procedure changes. We have not implemented these waypoints and paths. The earliest that we would implement these would be 2021. I'm not sure if anybody has anything to add to that, but the procedures, waypoints, and that we're discussing have not been implemented.
Yeah, that's correct. We have not implemented.
We haven't made any changes. Nothing has been implemented yet.
Okay, so there can be no procedure changes, but there can be impacts like east flow, west flow, wind driven weather. There can be things like that. There can even be changes in traffic patterns, or volume, traffic volume. But the procedures in the Miami area have not changed in recent years. So that's maybe just a misunderstanding or kind of a false premise there. Okay. All right, the next one. Good afternoon. I'm staff with Congresswoman Frederica Wilson. The Congresswoman represents Florida's 24th congressional district, and many of the municipalities that will be affected by the Miami changes. We've received an overwhelming number of complaints about changes in flight noise and pollution, particularly at night. I've personally observed this noise after being invited to a homeowners association meeting about this issue in North Biscayne corridor. Traffic's extremely low, loud, heavy. Despite the analysis presented, we've received information that the noise is unbearable for affecting quality of life and potentially mental health and property value. Our office has been told that no changes have been made to air traffic despite complaints of increased noise across our district. We've also attempted to speak with congressional liaisons to no avail. The major request is that traffic be directed further over water and not over homes. Also a concern is the timing and notice. We touched on this just a moment ago. Thank you for that comment. This project has not been implemented. I'm not sure that I can address why people are thinking that either they're equating existing noise or past noise with this project. There may be some other feedback, but we've kind of just said that in the last question. My office, I'm the regional administrator for Southern Region. I'm happy to reach out to the Congresswoman and the staff that's there to see if there are questions, if there's clarification that we can provide, to see if there's comments, and I'll invite everybody who's participating. We've done this a number of times, but on floridametroplexworkshops.com, there's a comments tab. If you want to provide feedback, you can do that directly on the website through email or through the mail. We're conducting these meetings to hear from the public. We're doing that in the best way that we know how, so that we make sure that we have opportunities to hear where there are concerns. We're trying to focus on the changes that are focused for the future that we're proposing. But it sounds like in maybe a couple of the last few questions, there have been some comments about existing noise. So again, our office in the FAA has some resources to support noise conversations, and we mentioned earlier that the airport does as well. So we need to modernize the national airspace system. We're balancing the needs. We are engaging with the public this year as well as last year, and hoping, we've had tremendous engagement from the public, and obviously we're getting some comments back, some questions for us, many of which today I think we've been able to provide some clarification. So any other thoughts from the panel?
Hey, Michael,
Jim?
I know that you liaise extensively with the congressional offices in the 9 states that you are responsible for. I'm DC based, and we have an Office of Government and Industry Affairs. I can tell you that those up on the Hill know how to get a hold of us, and they don't hesitate to ask us to help inform them on what we're doing should they hear from their constituents. And I know, just recently in this Zoom era that we're in, with Michael, we had a Zoom meeting with 3 staffs up on the Hill from the Appropriations Committee to discuss this very project. So you are being heard.
All right, great point, Jim. And we'll follow up. Okay. The response to the outbound flights is the response to the outbound flights is inappropriate, as the previous flight path went east to the ocean instead of up Biscayne Bay. So how did you manage it before? Air traffic, are you following that?
I'm not entirely sure. Maybe we want to pull up East Departure Board with flight tracks. So I believe possibly what this individual might be speaking about is those departures that go due eastbound. And those departures will now be on that southeast heading before turning to the northeast, but those are not the north departures that that we're talking about, driving them farther out and then turning north. These go out way out into the ocean, and probably for the majority of their flight going to New York and DC, they're probably over water. So I think, Louis, do you have anything on this?
No, the only other thing that I could point out, because I don't think this individual understands the interaction between arrivals and departures. The closer the arrivals are to the airport, the lower they're going to be, and the better chance that the controller is going to have to climb that departure on top of that arrival, keep a nice steady climb, less noise for everybody. If we were to extend all these departures out to the ocean, the arrivals, as they are further away from the airport, they're obviously going to be on a higher altitude. It's going to be a lot more difficult, almost impossible for us to climb departures on top of that arrival. And what would that create is they will go over populated areas not once but twice at low altitude. So one of the main reasons we going over Biscayne is because obviously it's a not populated area, and it's the best compromise that we can come up with. And also to point out, there's tracks that are currently going through there. We got tracks on the west side of the bay and on the east side of the bay. With this project, we try to consolidate that over water as much as possible.
So that's a great point, Luis. I'm sorry, Rick, just really quick. I want to emphasize, well, let me let you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we tried to stay in the backbone of our current tracks when we went north, and we tried to do it so that was over the middle of the bay as well. And if we drive these departures farther to the east, this also increases the exposure time of that aircraft in our airspace, which could potentially lead to more conflictions while we work that aircraft.
All right. Rick and Luis, thank you, and I appreciate your perspective on that. So I was just going to say the same thing, that there historically have been tracks. It almost seems like that question suggesting that we're proposing to now send flights up Biscayne Bay, but in fact, as you both said, tracks have gone up the bay, they've gone up the west side of the bay, they've gone up the east side of the bay, and I think what your point, Luis, was we're trying to have those be as far away from land as possible. So the center of the bay is better than going up the property along the shores of the bay. And that's really what our goal was there, was to minimize that impact over land, with that being the thought. Giving those aircraft time to climb to higher altitudes before they pass over land. Okay, any other additions to that? I think that actually may be our last question for today. So if we're done with that answer, then I will, that brings us to the end of the workshop. So I want to thank everybody for participating, everybody who asked us good questions today. I hope that our answers were informative. I hope they were helpful. I think in some cases, I believe they provided some needed clarification. And thanks to our specialists for providing expertise, air traffic control, our industry partners, the airport who joined us today. I'm not sure I said it earlier, but this is a federal action. This is an FAA project. So it's gone through the National Environmental Policy Act and the reviews that are appropriate for a federal action as part of our mission to safely and efficiently separate our traffic in the national airspace system. I'll add my thanks to the FAA communications team, everybody who supported us in the background for this workshop. I want to acknowledge everybody who participated and contributed your perspectives to the discussion. So thank you for that. And this workshop has been recorded. You can watch a rebroadcast of this workshop as well as the two previous workshops in Miami. Today's recording should be available tomorrow, but the recordings from yesterday and the day before, I believe, are already available at floridametroplexworkshops.com. I want to remind everyone that the questions asked today are not part of the legal record for the draft environmental assessment. To comment for the record, please go to the comments tab on floridametroplexworkshops.com. You can email us or send us a written comment, and those addresses are also on the comments tab on this website. The comment period's open until July 10th of 2020, and after the comment period closes, the FAA will consider and review all substantive comments received during the comment period. The FAA expects to issue an environmental determination in September 2020. That concludes our workshop today, and I want to thank everyone again for joining us.